to Reflection Interaction. I'm Professor Andrew McDonnell. I'm a clinical psychologist with over 35 years of working in human services. The podcast really focuses on how we change our own behaviour to support the behaviour of other people. It goes back to ancient Greek philosophers at the oracles of Delphi who talked about knowing thyself before you can truly know others. Good afternoon, everybody. We're today interviewing Ryan Niemiec, who is an amazing psychologist from the US, an amazing practitioner, and we're going to be exploring a range of different topics and see where it leads us to. So, without much ado, Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about how, to people who don't know of your work, obviously a number of us do, what the essence is of your work at the moment?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And it's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you, Andy and Ellie. So I think of myself as a scientist, as a practitioner, and as an educator and a writer. So kind of wearing lots of different hats. And I was trained as a clinical psychologist and worked with a number of different groups and populations and settings over the years, helping thousands of people. And in the last, it's been 16 years, I joined the VIA Institute on Character. So the VIA Institute is a nonprofit organization in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is kind of on the Midwest, but closer to the east side of the United States. And the focus is really quite simple but complicated. It's simply stated as the work is to advance the science and advance the practice of character strengths. So these qualities that are best in human beings are called character strengths, and that's what the work is. So I get to conduct research studies and collaborate with scientists around the world. I observe and connect with practitioners that are doing this work. So we're interested not just in character strengths in the workplace and in schools, which are probably the most common applications, but interested in health and medicine and disability and parenting and mindfulness and stress and problems and chronic illness and all these different topics. And I listen, I teach, I learn, I share, I regurgitate the science, I translate the science, all these different kinds of things in courses and books and articles. So that's me, maybe in a quick nutshell.
That's a pretty good nutshell. I mean, in terms of character strengths, which is a term that I'm very familiar with from, say, positive psychological processes or in that school of psychology. What is a character strength?
Well, a character strength, we have come to define it. I mean, if you look at any different article, there'll probably be a different definition. But in looking at the mounds of research and listening to the practitioners and putting together the concepts from really on this topic over hundreds of years, we've come to a definition of that these are part of our personality, our positive personality. They veer toward the positive. So positive personality traits, and they're traits because they're consistent. It's positive qualities that are consistent in us over situations and time. Traits like gratitude and love and kindness and teamwork and curiosity. So positive personality traits that then do three things. They reflect who we are. So they reflect our core identity, who we are in this world. They produce positive outcomes for ourselves and others. So they contribute, we're learning from science, they contribute quite significantly to our well-being and happiness. They contribute to our relationships, our health, to our adversity management, so managing problems and stress, coping with psychological problems and so on. And then third, they contribute to the greater good in society. You could kind of imagine, what would your family or your workplace culture or your school culture be like if you didn't have creativity, or if you didn't have leadership, if you didn't have hope, if you didn't have social intelligence, if you didn't have bravery and perseverance, we would be at a big loss. So these contribute to stronger families and schools and workplaces and neighborhoods and societies. That's how we have come to think about it. Yeah.
I think that's for our listeners, I think that's a really good kind of example. Obviously, one last question before I throw some over to Ellie. There's one other bit about these strengths is that these go across cultures, right? They're not just across North American culture. This is a universality about people having character strengths, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes, yes, it's a
Yeah.
great point. That was one of the important pieces with when the various scientists, about 55 scientists, got together in the early 2000s, really trying to ask and answer the question of what's best about human beings.
Mm.
What makes a flourishing life, a good life, a meaningful life, and they didn't want to just come up with some list like people have done throughout history. They wanted to learn from anybody who had ever written a text on virtue or strength or
Okay.
ethics. They wanted to travel to the most remote areas on the planet and speak with people in often untouched cultures. What's best about you in this culture? What's best about the people in your culture? And survey people across the really all the continents except for Antarctica. So absolutely, it was really key for it to not be some Western classification, but
Mm.
but really a human classification
Mm.
about what's best about us as human beings. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy. A
Yeah.
universal qualities.
Yeah. The other sort of thing that strikes me is that when you're looking at character strengths as things people have, yeah, how does that fit with things like the DSM and the obsession that we have, hint there, Ryan, in classification as almost like a negative, people are broken, they're deficient. Where does this fit into that whole cocktail morass of knowledge?
Yeah, it's a game changer is where it fits
Mm.
in. It's a game changer for how we think about people and how we connect with people and how we see ourselves. This when this classification first came out in 2004, it was called sort of tongue in cheek the anti-DSM.
Mm. Mm.
As
I
a
know.
tongue in cheek. I mean, it's certainly there can be ways that they integrate together and character science can inform
Yeah.
psychological disorders we are finding. But they really provide a nice, you could think of it as a nice bookend. We have this classification, this language of what's best in us, and then the DSM and ICD-9 and 10 for medical disorders are kind of big systems for what's going wrong with people physically or psychologically. So here we have a really more of a balance in that sense, and we have an opportunity then to do some positive labeling.
Yeah.
As we know with DSM, there's lots of labeling of this condition or that, and there's a lot of good that can come from that. But here we have a chance to actually label people with our perception of what we perceive to be best about them. So we see the
Yeah.
person very curious or loving, and we call it out. And
Yeah.
then that can be that game changer where they shift in how they see themselves, especially for people that are only labeled and lost in kind of all the negativity that is put upon them and all those kind of intense labels.
I often get people criticizing sort of generally positive psychological approaches. I discovered years ago that I am a positive psychologist before I even had any training in it. I'm one of these people with the traits of hope, get people to cheer up, be positive, get out of the doom and gloom. I only realised that, but I was reminded once of what something that Martin Seligman said, and it was slightly tongue in cheek, which is that positive psychology can make somebody miserable less miserable, somebody who's happy slightly more happy. And I know what he was saying with that was kind of, hey, this is not a magic bullet, but it's a mindset change.
Yeah.
And I think the work you're doing is a mindset change, is what we're trying, particularly what you're trying to do as well with this.
I mean, I think that characterizes it nicely, and that we are helping people to have that different way of looking, that to be able to see the good in the person, to be able to see the strength, and we often need a language to be able to look for the good, and to be able to be more specific
Mm.
rather than just kind of generically saying, oh yeah, you're a good person or you're nice,
Yeah.
but to really get into what's best about who that person is. So it is a nice counterbalance. Oh, you know what? When you were just saying that, it about Marty Seligman, it made me think of a kind of a way that we have captured the science with character strengths.
Yeah.
We bring it down to two different ways of two different buckets, I guess you could say. Though
Yeah.
there's like over 1,000 studies now. So, well-being and adversity. So that character strengths help us to go from what's wrong to what's strong. So they help us to make that shift.
Okay. Like
But
that.
then, and then on the other side, the adversity side, they help us you to use what's strong to deal with what's wrong. And wrong might not be the best word, but to deal with basically to deal with any kind of suffering or any struggles, character strengths can help with the adversity side of things too. So it's more of a kind of a holistic way of looking
Yeah.
at this well-being and adversity.
In my field, autism disabilities, one of the things that's very hard to stop people doing is to overemphasize and be obsessed with negative recording as if it doesn't have an impact on their behavior. I fill out a form that says I was nearly hurt today, or I was a near miss form. Within that kind of process is how we tend to try and apply some of the work you're doing for people to say, shift away from that without, doesn't really say we're crazy or we're not trying to do things that are dangerous, but we're trying to reframe the problem, which is a nice example with Ellie here, my colleague, who actually has a hashtag called flip the narrative. Is that not right, Ellie? Which I think really tunes with what Ryan's talking about.
It's, yeah. So Ryan, I was just thinking that that whole hashtag came out of a direct lived experience with my daughter. As you know, she's deafblind, and she did something very so I'm just thinking about, I'm absorbing what you've just been talking about, because I love your work. I think it's what should be at the front end, and we often treat it as an add-on, but it's so critically vital to keeping a humanized approach in place and for people to feel good about themselves. Because for me, when they feel good about themselves, they support well. If somebody isn't feeling good, you generally transact that emotion. We are transacting stressed emotion all the time. And we talk about affecting the pulse of intention with my daughter. This was one of the terms we used to use before I discovered all this stuff had names. And it's her ability to pick up on that vibe energetically. She doesn't use her eyes or her ears like we do, but she's emotionally in tune in a way I don't think we'll ever achieve. But we're practicing and trying to. And there's this person in our space demonstrating it beautifully, but is in another way narrated as being other, different, broken, disabled, no use, and actually she flipped it round for me, because she will not be removed in any way, shape or form from who she is authentically every day. She cannot leave that space. She doesn't hide it. She doesn't try and do it. And this is all the stuff we do. We're quite messy with this stuff. She's very wedded to who she is. So she was demonstrating consistently and persistently until I got the message. And I thought, we've got this upside down, actually. This young woman is really showing why this stuff that you're talking about really, really matters, because she demonstrates it, she shares it, and she can read us because she uses those skills, and she is very, very much using them before anything else. She doesn't get distracted by noise and social media and internet and people's opinions. She just stays very present, very much in the moment. I wondered whether there had been a profound experience of any description that actually brought you into this space, or whether this is just something that grew out of a passion linked to psychology. Did you have a personal experience that actually, when you have these life shifts, or you find yourself in a place and think, how did I get here? What was that for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Can I first just comment on, when I was hearing you talk about your daughter, I was like spotting the character strengths. So I don't know if this resonates for you, but what I was hearing in what you were saying is social intelligence. So her capacity to be emotionally tuned in and just being aware of what was going on. I was hearing honesty, and her just that authentic presence that she is who she is, and she puts that forward. She doesn't have to hide from that. And then the third strength I was hearing was self-regulation, kind of that sense of being, maybe consistent and managing herself, being consistent over the days. I don't know if that resonates, but that's three different of the these character strengths nest under the bigger virtues. So there's the virtue of courage, the virtue of humanity, and the virtue of temperance, represented in those three strengths. So that's just I'm just doing some example of strength spotting, and just in a very genuine way. That was just what I heard. And then that's what we can do, with the people in our life. But I don't know, I know you have a question for me that you just asked, but I'm curious how that resonates with you.
No, it resonates entirely, because that's what I see. I really believe and see the value in what she teaches. She's my teacher, so she's a much higher level than I am in those areas you just talked about. That's the stuff I think collectively we're actually striving to do better. Going on mindfulness training, yoga, Pilates, breath work, whatever you choose, to try and find some kind of form of balance in this very out of kilter pace we've got going on in our lives, which is got lots of people dysregulated and lots of people out of step with what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. And it's almost come about in a stealth form, but now it's here. We seem to be really trying to go back and find a different way of stripping it out again. So she models in sort of the middle of this what you just said. And that's why I think we have to hear people like Ella so much more. We need to place them at the front rather than always putting them at the back, because we have done that consistently. And she's not someone who relies on words. She's predominantly non-speaking. She doesn't need words, to be honest. She's very powerful without them if you actually lean into the space she's in and share it appropriately and really actively listen. She does not need to use words. We need words. We gap fill all the time with words because we don't lean into the stuff you were just talking about more. So yeah, absolutely landed beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, just yeah, that I mean, just again, we're just resonating again with the social intelligence of that she has
Yeah.
a way to communicate without words that's very powerful. But it's the people that need to be listening and
Yes.
be trained to be present and attend. And it's just such a beautiful story. And I will get to your question in a second, but I just wanted to also share that it makes me think about how I as a parent, I have three children, ages 9 to 14, and one child does happen to have Down syndrome, my middle child, second son. And yeah, I probably need to do better at the mindset of seeing him as a teacher to me. Certainly I might come across as a teacher to him, and um, and I sometimes do, and then sometimes don't. And there's so much that I have to learn from him. When I reflect, on his character strengths, he is really an exemplar. Like you're talking about, your daughter's kind of an exemplar of social intelligence and maybe some of these other strengths. My son Ryland, I mean, he's kind of an exemplar of love. I mean, he's the first one to greet me if I come in and the family's all there. He's the one that shows just this genuine celebratory smile when he sees me. He's very hug and touch, which is kind of my like love language is physical touch. So he'll he come up to me and kind of embrace me, and we could just see and feel the love immediately, and that while I am present in the moment, I think I need to see that as how can that teach me, even further in my life, with other people and with other kids and so on.
It's such a reminder of joy, isn't it? Like untainted, sort of paralleled joy, and actually daring to be quite so vulnerable.
Mm.
I can show you pure love, and I am utterly fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are terrified of doing that. It's too vulnerable. It can be, I think, for many, you really need to be with that person that you genuinely feel you can lean in 100%. It's your son is reminding me of two friends I have, Sally and Haley, and their children, Ollie and Natty, regularly have posted and shared this. It's like unparalleled levels of joy. And whenever they share these, whatever they've been up to, it just makes people feel good. It's not done to do that, but it actually creates a real resonance of, I want more of this in my life and less of that stuff. This is the good stuff. So it really, really resonated what you were saying there about your son.
Before Ryan gets onto that, I want to comment on something as well, which is that it is about all of our work, Ryan. All of it is about emotional literacy. It's not about blaming people. It's about just getting them to emotionally connect with people. And I think what you both said there, well, actually, it's quite moving, and it's actually allowing people to be open, to just
experiencing things at times and not cluttering it up. This is what it's all about. It's basic human experience. So how did you get to be where you are now? What was your journey? I think that was your question, Ellie, wasn't it? Or something like that. Wasn't it?
Was there an experience that really
Oh, the
impacted
experience,
you,
sorry.
other than, was there something that just sort of re-navigated you to the work you're doing, or was it a natural flow and progress?
It's not like one transformative experience. I mean, I've had that like kind of like I've had transcendent experiences with, like a stingray, when I was in Tahiti and things like that, and a sloth in Costa Rica. Like I so like wildlife transcending kind of experiences where you feel like a oneness with the universe. So I certainly have big, important experiences that then stick with me and impact me. When it comes to the character strengths work, there's just so many little mini important experiences that have happened. I mean, and just a collective way of just kind of, I guess, going back to mindset, my approach. So like I had a mindset just from graduate school of trying to see people holistically. So I deliberately, even though I was getting training to become a doctor of psychology, I sought out literally training to understand the physical body and to understand spirituality and to understand the social life. And so then when character strengths, this language came along in 2004, it was just another lens for being more holistic, for seeing people in a more complete way, really. So that's kind of part of it. Like that was an important part of the journey. And then, there was sort of one aha moment that maybe I didn't know, maybe a synchronicity, like this happened, and then the character strengths happened, which was I was my wife and I were driving uh, home to St. Louis where we had lived, and it was kind of a long drive, always back to see our family. And we always would have sort of discussions or maybe arguments about, we need to live closer to the family. We need to be closer, and it stinks to have to drive 5 hours here and there. And I'd always be like, well, I'm doing so well in St. Louis. Like I'm
Yeah.
Mindfulness was just getting started, and kind of I was like the main person for mindfulness in the region and teaching it and doing workshops for professionals. And I was at a psychology clinic doing work in the primary care setting with chronic pain, a psychology and religion program, an outpatient club program. I was in all these different professional pieces. I was doing tennis and had gone to nationals twice in tennis. And so like all this good stuff is happening in St. Louis. And so we would have this battle back and forth. And then in that drive home on this one time, it was like 2008. I just, in my mind, I clicked to just say, but what if? Like I flipped the story completely. I said, well, what if we just moved? What if I left St. Louis? I could still do mindfulness stuff. I can still, develop, all these other kind of professional connections or whatever. And I asked myself that, and I didn't feel horrible about it. Like it felt, pretty exciting and good. And then we were talking. So I was talking to my wife, and she was excited about it. And so we decided in that moment, then we just picked Cincinnati. I'd never been to Cincinnati, and that was the one city between Kentucky, where my wife was from, and Michigan, where I'm from, is the one city I'd kind of in my life maybe heard slightly, kind of good things, just nothing negative about it. Sometimes people will critique this city in Ohio or that city in Ohio, but Cincinnati was one that was kind of like a pearl in the state. I don't know if that weighed into this or what, but we just decided in that moment that Cincinnati seems that's going to be what we're going to do. So it took a year to be able to sell a house at the worst time in the economy since the Great Depression, to build a house in Cincinnati, and both of us to look from scratch for jobs.
Wow.
But it was in that moment that made that switch, and then there was another synchronicity story that got me to the VIA Institute. And so there's those kind
I
of
love this. I love
yeah
this. It's like
yeah
you were following a trail of breadcrumbs, or you just were following your gut at this point and
yeah.
letting it unfold. So you just let go and let it lead, or whatever was lead. Something was drawing you to this, and then you end up in the VIE. Yeah,
Yeah.
is that right?
Right. Yeah. And that is another little synchronicity story where my wife and I were in that process then. It was after that point where I had, that click of like, what if? And so we decided it is Cincinnati. We're starting this process, and it's going to take some months. And I happened to be just reading an email And my wife happened to be next to me, which like never happens, that she would be looking over my shoulder. And I was reading this email. I got this message from a person named Neil Mayerson. And I said, "Oh, this guy, I've never met him before. He's asking me for some thoughts on positive movies, for an event that he's doing, because I had written a book called Positive Psychology of the Movies in 2008. And he's asking for some advice, and I was like, I don't know him, but I'll offer some ideas. And then she just happened to be looking, and she says, but Ryan, look at the phone number he put under his name. It's a 513 area code, and that's Cincinnati, where we're moving." And I was like, wow. Oh, yeah, okay. So that sounds good. Maybe there's something there. And it turns out he was the chairman and the co-founder of VIA, which I had
Okay.
written a book based on VIA, but didn't even know there was a Cincinnati organization. I just knew the scholarly work. I didn't know the nonprofit that was behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
So then I then just reached out to Neil, and then through different conversations, VIA was just getting started at that point, 2008, 2009. Not getting started as an organization, getting started
Yeah.
as in moving from the science to what do we do with all this research on character strengths that's coming out. We need a practitioner. We need some practice on this. We're getting requests from around the world of, okay, this classification is great, but how do you apply it for workplace or schools? So they needed somebody like that. And I had, was a practicing clinical psychologist and had some of that background on the classification. So ended up being a good fit, and was really like the second hire for the organization, and the longest lasting, because I'm still there 16 years later. So, but
It's
so yeah, these
amazing.
little synchron, I call them
Yeah.
synchronicities. Like
I like synchronicities. I'm with you on that. I'm wondering whether Andy's is. Are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
okay with
Yeah, yeah.
synchronicities,
I'm
Andy?
okay
Yeah.
with synchronicity,
Okay.
but the one thing I would say is, and I think that's really resonates about taking risks and going sometimes with your gut, sticking a pin on the map. You happen to be there. When I trained as a clinical psychologist, I'm from London. I came up to Birmingham and I said, 2 years and we're gone. That was in 1988. I still haven't got around to moving
long 2
yet,
years.
but eventually I probably will at some point. But the bit I want to take you back even slightly further with this is that I've got to ask this, and this is as a club member, why did you choose clinical psychology, or was that synchronicity as well?
Yeah, that was something very clear in my mind, that it sounds a little cliche, but it was to help people. I know
Yeah.
that's an easy cop out kind of answer, but that is what was at least in my mind as that, late teenager, early 20s person was, that, I didn't know anything about science or research. So that part of psychology didn't speak to me at all. I didn't know anything about it. So that wasn't the draw at all. It was that I could be there, sitting there with. Usually, I had imaged it as one person, but I later did lots of group work. But I imaged sitting there with one other person, that words that I might use, or a lack of words, and being present, that could positively impact somebody, and that kind of fascinated me. And it was just something, since high school, so 12th grade, so around age 16, 17. I took one psychology class in high school, and it just resonated with me more than anything else. I liked the history, I liked the theories, I liked the content, really well, and I think I was just going with that. It was the one thing that is consistently kept my attention, and then I never left it. I then entered from high school. I went to Michigan State University, and like you have to declare a major before you even arrive,
Yeah.
and it was cool for everybody to say business at the time, and it was a good business school, and oh, business, you're going to make money. So I, like many people, just followed in that moment and just put business down. And then just over that first week, literally at Michigan State, I would think about it. I'm like, I don't want to be in this business class. I don't want to do this. This doesn't fit with me at all. This is terrible, and my I liked the psychology class in high school. It's never left me. I'm just going to just redeclare a new major here in this first week and declare psychology. And then it just was never a wrong decision. It was just always right. And then the clinical psych, I decided to say a fifth year, at to get a second bachelor's degree. I got a bachelor's in psychology and in English, which is more for the creative writing part of English. And so it was in that fifth year, in fourth and fifth year, that I was like, okay, it's clinical psychology that I'll do, because that's the helping way. And some of this other stuff, whether it's social psychology or research psychology, I would learn about, or that wasn't an appeal at the time. It was just the helping piece. So that was the journey there. And then again, I've still never looked back. It's sometimes when I like, even now, like you might notice in the very beginning, I didn't say, as you said, I was a psychologist, which is true. I'm a licensed psychologist and a clinical psychologist. But I don't really lead with that. I just lead with, just because I think people immediately have so many misconceptions about what that
Hmm.
means. And then I get
Oh
put in a
yeah.
box, and I'm like, I'm not doing individual therapy anymore. I mean, I've done that extensively, but now I'm using all that knowledge to help
Yeah.
people, at a bigger level of the writing, through writing or keynote addresses to lots of people or podcasts or things like that. And so then I'm more of like an educator, scientist,
Yeah.
practitioner. But yeah,
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. This podcast is about you. I mean, my contrast is I didn't think I'd be good enough to do all this kind of highfalutin work. I chose psychology because I could get a BSc in it, Bachelor of Science, and everything kind of snowballed after that. And my experience was I met a lot of undergrads who were like, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist. And I'd be saying things like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm probably having a bit of a crisis at the moment. Sorry. Most of those people who I studied with never became clinical psychologists. And this is a kind of an interesting thing about when my attention was drawn to it to that level. I thought, oh, this is something I really could do. And the characteristic that was given to me was you're very inquisitive, which is the cliche stereotype, but it happens to be true. I can't sit in a bar without listening to 4 conversations as well as talk to someone. These guys will tell you that. I can't switch off from that. Well, we're going to get away from psychology back to, if you like, the real world experiences. So don't worry, we're going to be back on track with, we've talked about character strengths. And actually, I know Ellie's quite itching as well to talk to you about almost like what your view of mindfulness is. Yeah. Because it's a term that's, I think, quite loaded at times that people say, oh, I know what mindfulness is. Well, it's a particular therapy or it's a particular approach. To you, what is mindfulness and what is being mindful? The two questions.
Yeah, you're right that, that mindfulness has become a household name, which has
Yeah.
its pros and cons.
Yeah.
A con is the McDonald's mindfulness, as we say it, like everybody says it, knows it, and does it, and
I love
then
that.
and then maybe and then maybe applies it poorly
Yeah.
in, like, say, the business setting and trying to help people become more mindful so the business can make more money or something, and it kind of goes against the spirit and approach of mindfulness. So there's a lot of cons to it, but so I'm so happy that it is popular, though, because then there's a lot more potential, for us as human beings if we pay attention to what it actually is and practice it. So I actually, there's lots on my journey with mindfulness, which long predates my character strengths journey, because my mindfulness journey would go back to the 90s.
Mm.
But I not to sound like a nerd, but I go by the scientific definition of mindfulness, because I think it's really helpful. Where researchers got together in the early 2000s, different mindfulness researchers from different countries, really to try to understand what is this thing called mindfulness that's now becoming quite popular, not as popular as it is now, because again, this was 21 years ago or so. But so they scoured the self-help people have said. They scoured what the researchers have said and the wisdom figures have said. They looked throughout the research literature, and then they convened. It was about 20 researchers, and they came up with a two-part definition. And this is what I go by. So they said that mindfulness is the self-regulation of our attention with an attitude of curiosity, openness, and acceptance.
I
So
like that.
yeah, so the what of mindfulness is this, like, what is it? It's the self-regulation of our attention. It's not just like sitting there with our eyes closed, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my attention right now to this flower. I'm going to bring my attention right now to Ellie and slightly nodding her head, or I'm going to bring my attention to this coffee and feel the coffee against my lips, or whatever. So that's the what. This I'm controlling. I have some control of my attention, not full control, but I have a lot of control. And then what do I do with that is the particular attitude or the how of
Mm.
mindfulness. And that's, I can be with that attention. I can then be curious. So I'm interested in whatever it is, even if it's suffering, I can be interested in that and learn from it.
Mm.
So curious, and then being open to the possibilities of the moment, and then accepting. I can accept that this is the way things are in this moment, this second. Not that I want it to always be this stressful or this difficult or whatever, but I can accept it for what it is. This is my human experience in this moment. So that's the definition, and it's beautiful for me in part because it links in with two of the character strengths of the VIA classification: self-regulation and curiosity. And of course, it can be applied. Mindfulness can be applied to any character strength, but so it fits nicely like that.
I'm going to make a plug for somebody I used to work with who sadly passed away now, that my colleague called Michael McCready, who would quote that sort of definition, but what he would just say is, it's all about your attentional shift, the first focus of it. If you can be going through the motions unless you're really drawing true attention to stuff. And if I have a slight concern, it's a bit like cognitive behavior therapy was, and we had a phase where if you weren't teaching or doing cognitive behavior therapy, you weren't hip. And with the kids, there's a thing here about the difference between actual mindfulness and I think I like your McDonald's. I love your McDonald mindfulness kind of approach. I will be using that a bit, and beware I'll be using that. That's going out on social media, and I'll attribute you, not me, to that. Well, Ryan Niemiec said McDonald's mindfulness, not me, of course, because it is right. It kind of encapsulates the two different things, really. Anything that shifts your attention has got to be part of it, which my passion is around flow states and flow psychology, which has always been because I'm the kind of person personally who struggles with certain more classical mindfulness methods, and I do. My brain's on the go all the time. But what it means is that what I tune out from, to me, is so important, even for those moments. And there are things.
So yeah, Ryan, I was just thinking again, I was thinking about the more relatable human experience that the majority are having. Some obviously will meet you in that psychology space, the more clinically minded space, but in terms of just everyday humans, you talk a lot about this mindful pause, and I watched you doing this on a video before we have our podcast, just because I wanted to understand what it is you were passionate, and you were talking people through how to get into this mindful pause. And again, just experience, my daughter taught me about this, so I talk about a lot the power of a pause, and I didn't know it was a thing. It was just what she made me do. And coming to it through experience, not knowing it's an actual thing, wondering if people will think I'm being slightly, off the wall here, but then realizing, no, it is actually and again, it underpinning quite how masterful she is in terms of really repointing and pointing again back to the things that you're talking about, and why being present is quite so important, because we aren't a lot of the time, are we? We are moving on and we are distracted, and our society invites distraction, doesn't it? So if you're not scrolling on your phone, our attention seems to have shrunk for mindful conversations, being present, doing things slowly. And one of the benefits of, well, I'm deaf, so I need things slower, can't do all this speed. And my daughter's deafblind, so she really needs you to slow down. And it's really confronting for people and very counterintuitive. So I was just wondering whether you think this needing to be mindful about our pausing, but also how we take our pausing. Do you think now is a time more than ever that that's prescient, or has it always been the case, but because we are evolving at such speed, it is now fairly crucial that we take these things on board more? Because I think, again, it's something my daughter does naturally. It's just her way and state of being.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's easy for me to kind of say that we do need it more now than ever before. But I mean, I wasn't there, 100 years ago or 500 years ago, and I think it makes good sense that that we need it more now than ever before because of how fast paced our everything is. I think nowadays with the technology, it's like we have less and less of a chance, and we need mindfulness to help us to give more of a fighting chance to connect and to be present. And that mindfulness doesn't have to be like a big thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing where we're, sitting and meditating for a long time. It can just be to slow down. Or one of the mindfulness practices is literally just called stopping, because our mind, we just get in the same habit of doing the same thing with our child when they come into the room, or with our spouse when they come in, or our friend. We answer the phone the same way, or we chat the same way. But can we just stop, and just pause, maybe do a mindful pause where we take 2 or 3 breaths and then come back to ourselves. And so the mindful pause is we take 2 or 3 breaths, and then we ask ourselves, which should I come back to in myself? In other words, what character strength should I come back to? Yeah. So I think we do need a whole lot more of that. And what would society be like if we all paused 100 times during the day and practice a little bit more of that mindfulness for the environment, for people, for the world?
Do you think it would break this persistent cycle of fear and anxiety that seems to be being fed to us through these, the faster we go, the more we're fed, it's like, do you think we could put the brakes on if we were a bit more, all of us, a bit more aware of that, like you say, even if we just did the stopping? Like, no, enough, like enough. This is actually really bad for us. Like it is. Everybody knows it is. It's not good for your health. It's like anything. My granny always used to say, moderation in all things. A little bit of, it's that sort of, where are we getting the yin and the yang? How are we balancing it? Leaning in. Again, thinking about my daughter and how she does this, because she demands presence. My presence, and she knows the minute I'm off topic in my head, and she sort of, the finger comes up.
She catches your mind wandering.
Oh yeah, very good at it, and she can spot. It's like she has our poker tails nailed. So if you think, and she's blind, so I wonder, the emotional connectedness to resonance, and you've left this room. I mean, we do it visually, we can see it, but also I think we sense it. I do think we know, children know when their parents are disconnected or not with us anymore, and they are thinking about something else, and we are aware of it in other people. I don't know what that is, but I don't think it's just visual. And she's very much, the finger comes up like, I don't think so. And or she'll say door, which is, do you want to just go and sort yourself out and then come back when you're ready? And we're all quite used to being doored. Door is like, go and sort yourself out, and then when you're okay, you can come and share my space again. Because I really don't need that. It's very good, because she can't filter it out. So she's acutely aware, more than we are, I think, sometimes. And when we're being very mindful about our pauses and mindful about our thinking and she's very much she's really comfortable in our space, because we are regulating the mind pace. Do you think it links to our other regulation needs and how we regulate our physical bodies? And
yeah, I can answer. I just wanted to say, about when you talked about your daughter, one of the things I like about that also is that she does communicate that hey, this is that you are not being present right now, and how we often don't do that in our communication. I might notice somebody's eyes glaze over, and I know they're not paying attention, or they kind of like look off a little bit, but I don't necessarily do that. And so, but I probably should.
Ryan,
It's
you
like
should do this and say door.
Come back. Yeah, I noticed it immediately in my closest friend, and then I know, like, to myself, I'm gonna have to repeat this story. I'm gonna have to repeat this sentence, because he just he winded off. I could tell, and then your daughter picks up on it and then communicates it. And then it's kind of a wake up call for us if we're listening, like, okay, I do need a little break. I've been going through a lot right now.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm good. I'll just thank you for the reminder. I'm coming. Yeah.
I want to make a bit of a plea as well with, we were talking about today about, in our day-to-day work around, a lot around confrontation, Ryan, is that, we're wanting supporters, staff, parents, families, the words we use for it, to role model being a little bit more regulated themselves.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
big ask a lot of the time in our
Mhm.
industry, almost like people are drawn to, I want to focus on this person's behavior and what they've done to me, not on, you want me to focus on how I am? Can I be present with that person? And what I've found in my life experiences in practice is that people who are a little bit more reflective in their practice, accept their faults, can just be with someone, we call that part of low arousal. They tend to get hit and hurt less as well. But that's
Yeah.
been my observations in life. I can spot the person who comes into a room and think, you're going to get hit, you're going to frighten someone, you're going to startle someone. You need to take it down, maybe like 99 decibels out of 100, and just move slowly, be around someone. Don't be a threat. There's a lot here about how we integrate these ideas into just a way of practice, and for me, I think I said to somebody recently, the real test about whether you value someone is when they're chasing you around the room, dysregulated and not happy.
Mhm.
How you respond in those situations, non-violently and passively and in a safe way, for me has always been, it's my thing. It's been that one moment. And I'm hearing today quite a lot of stuff about how you apply character strengths, and we're obviously going to want to know more. You might be invited back for some more podcasts. There are no rules here, are there, Ellie? Really, we write them. So we'll see how we go with that, definitely. But
But yeah, thank you, Andy. And I am with you on that, like with that approach, can the person, when there's somebody that's running around the room and
yeah,
screaming or doing whatever they're doing, can the person supporting them, find
breathe.
their own inner peace and inner stability, and is mindfulness a mechanism for it? Maybe it's using certain character strengths. They turn to their curiosity or their love or whatever is
Yeah,
kind of natural for them. Maybe it's their prudence character strength, but can
Yeah.
they find that inner stability and calmness? And that, I mean, I think of that as equanimity. Can they
yeah,
find equanimity in the
Yeah.
storm, the calm in the storm, the eye of the storm?
yeah,
Yeah, that's the challenge. Yeah, there was. It makes me think of there's a story of Thich Nhat Hanh. So speaking of people who have influenced me, I would say probably the biggest kind of professional and personal influence maybe of a person that's out there. Um, uh, who passed away 3 years ago, is Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a
yeah,
Zen master nominated for the
yeah,
Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King, has written over, 100 books on peace and mindfulness. So he tells a story of refugees and who are, if there's a group of refugees in a boat and they're escaping from a war-torn country to a place of safe harbor, and they're out at sea, and there's pirate boats that are looming that are of course quite deadly, and then there's the storm that's coming, and there's people that are crying and upset, and just I mean unimaginable trauma going on throughout this boat of 10, 20, 50 people. What he observed and would always speak of is that if there's one person on that boat that can be calm, to
yeah,
be that calm presence, that can make all the difference for the rest of the boat. But if everybody is just chaotic, then the chaos just continues. But that one person that's, call it mindfulness and coming
yeah,
back, calling equanimity, whatever you call it, and then others see that as a model and can find maybe not perfect peace amongst the trauma, but can find a little bit of something to hold
yeah.
on to, a little
That's
bit of
a
stability.
that's a lovely example. I discovered I talk, and Ellie is going to be very professional here and not go, oh yeah, I could talk for the Olympic Games. If it was a sport, I get a gold medal in every single sport. However, when I'm working with people and I discover this who are quite distressed, I become a different person. Almost I go into that cocoon of I need to be focused on this person 100% of the time. So in my work, I think sometimes thought I was being more courageous than I actually was. My reactions in your example in the storm is I know I'd be one of those people saying, nothing to see here, guys. Of course, we're going to make it to the end. I might be thinking we're probably not, but that's not going to help anyone. You go into that kind of mode. And we've noticed people who have that. Now, I discovered it.
Mhm.
I got into my job because I discovered I had something like that. I
Mm,
still yak like a machine gun now. I'd probably be the most non-mindful person you'd ever meet, Ryan. But on the other hand, in those moments and how we are, it's the focus, it's the attentional shift. And instead of it's actually saying, I can focus on you or this person like nothing else matters.
mm, mm-hmm.
Then afterwards, I worry about it. I'm the person who I discovered this with the exams. I worried about exams after I'd done them. Never before or never during. I know that's a bit weird. You probably won't think it's weird, but it's a kind of good way to be if you want to pass exams. So I think there's a notion here about being in the moment, even in all those things. And I love the storm analogy because I just think that fits. A colleague of ours, David Petoniak, I don't know if you're familiar with David. He's somebody who works in disabilities field a lot. He's now semi-retired. He would use that and he would quote that kind of analogy of saying, well, sometimes in a storm, you don't blame the storm, you batten down the hatches. Yeah. There's no point telling the storm off. There's no point giving the storm consequences. It ain't going to change. You've got to ride it out. And to me, that was one of the most profound influences I've had in my career, just hearing him say that.
I think in the article you did very recently, you shared it on LinkedIn, didn't you? You collated together. I'm right in saying it was Psychology Today, wasn't it? So you collated, really, for me, it was a very readable, relatable piece. So anybody could pick that up and read it and understand what you were saying. I loved the way you languaged it. And it was the 10 sort of prominent character strengths, or the 10 things that float to the top that we should be giving our attention to. We don't have time for you to go into all 10, but I wonder if you could sort of cherry pick. I know you've talked about stopping a bit, but could you explain that a bit more? Because I loved that one in particular, because I think everybody can do it quite quickly, and because the way you wrote it. So if anybody wants to find that article, Ryan has shared that on LinkedIn, and it is in Psychology Today, but it just gives you an in to the character and the mindfulness and the strengths-based practice and everything that you talked about today, just in a very digestible way for anybody who's coming at it from a non-psychology platform, just a part of human. I'm stuck in this machine of anxiety, fear, and speed. How do I get off? And that's a nice place to start. I don't know if you could just go over there. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was kind of convening a meeting with people who are MBSP certified. So MBSP stands for Mindfulness-Based Strengths Practice. So it's an 8-week program that brings mindfulness and strengths together. So it's one of VIA's 2 certification programs in MBSP. So I was convening this meeting of people that are certified. There was about 20 people that were there. And I just, with everything going on and the chaos going on, I said, I put people in small groups with just one question and just said, how do you best deal with turbulent times or difficult times or unsettling times, the volatile times? How do you best deal with that? What are you doing to either get through it? Some people just might be barely head above water managing it, or maybe can you even flourish, despite what's going on around you? And so each group discussed it, and then we did a large group debrief, and then I just kind of grabbed the 10 themes that I heard, and then put that in that Psychology Today article. So one of the common themes that the groups talked about, I think every group talked about having some mindful consumption. So mindful consumption,
I love this.
Specifically of the news, so we could think of it kind of almost like spiritually, like having a balance of taking in and giving, so like, what are we taking in, and being mindful of what's coming at us? So is it literally thousands of things we're scrolling on YouTube videos, or is it just listening to certain or watching certain TV shows over and over again, or news programs? What are we taking in, and how is that affecting our body? Because you are taking it in. It is affecting your body and mind. There's no question about that. And it can make anxiety worse and depression worse and suffering worse. So being mindful of the consumption of what we're taking in, from news and social media, and potentially, even if it makes sense, set a plan for it. So it might be that a person's like, I'm only gonna take in consume the news or social media, in the morning between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, or they might set a quantity limit. I'm only going to listen to one news program a day, no more than 30 minutes, or I'm only going to read 4 news stories. Normally I read 20, I'm only going to do 4. And we have these kind of limits. Some people do a full fast, and like, I'm not going to look at anything on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and some people do a family fast, on Sunday. There's no electronics, nothing. It's a fasting day, and it's just a time to be together. So that was a theme that came about as really helping these individuals.
It'd be the same as someone who got overabsorbed in reading. Do you remember? I like the analogy of when we had the first printing presses, which were Chinese, by the way. not Western, but there you go. Everyone said that books were going to destroy the world, but we learned before they got less expensive, we learned that this is a medium, it's a tool, you know.
But I just want to make a comment, Andy,
Yeah.
from listening to you, and I'm really, just hearing these different dialectics that you kind of manage, like, where there's like two different opposing forces and both can be true. I think in society, a lot of times people think it, all or none, something's got to be this or that. This is a good person, this is a bad person. But like, it just in your life and sharing, there's the Andy going, 100 miles an hour, and then there's the slowing down and maybe no electronics this day.
Yeah.
And then there's the Andy that you had said like likes to talk a lot, but then there's the Andy that just likes to deeply be present and listen. And it's just beautiful, like, right? Because that's the human experience of that both of these extremes. I don't know if extremes is the right word.
The only thing that's not beautiful, and thank you for that, is anyone who's in a car with me doesn't share that experience ever. And before Ellie says anything, okay, I did see that car when I.
Well, they want the present Andy, right? Not the talking Andy.
I saw that in my mind's eye. Don't you worry. But no, it is true, and I think we all got to do it in our own way, and that's why my own thing that I love about what Ellie's got here is I think we should have a whole conversation about stress management with your perspectives and vice versa, because it is hard. We're not saying these things are easy.
I think it's very, very, like I say, right, for the listener who maybe isn't dyed into the psychology wool, this is very interesting because it is very topical. It's what we see coming up again and again, an invitation to go to yoga, go to Pilates, go to mindfulness classes, to regulate. How do we regulate? Do we understand? And do we have names? And can we stop and see our lives in that way? Have we ever thought about it? We're feeling all the stress and the pressure from it, but has anybody invited you just to actually spend some time stopping and examining it? And I think that's where your work is so easily accessible. It feels really helpful. And I would like, as a final, because we're going to have to let you go and we've only got 4 minutes, but I would like to know.
We want to extend this back.
No, I'm afraid, Andy, I am having the last word today. So what I'd like to ask Ryan is, if you could be known for one thing, Ryan, one thing, what would your epitaph be? What would you want to say? That's what I did. Or what is it you would like to be known as? Because we just want to capture. If you've never thought about that, you've got about 4 minutes.
Yeah. The word that comes to my mind is goodness. That that it might say something like he exhibited and championed and helped people to discover more human goodness, and that had lots of good ripples in society. Something like that. It would have to be much neater and briefer, but
I like that. I love that.
Goodness rippler, something like that.
Goodness rippler.
Yeah.
I love the goodness rippler. I think I've never heard of that before, and I think that should be yours. We need so much more of this, Ryan. We need loads of this positivity and focusing on it and drawing it out and inviting people to spend time like goodness scrolling instead of doom scrolling. Like do the opposite. Like you can do the same activity, but for far better, more positive things. Do you know about this stuff? And I think when we open up and talk about it more, like say you do it in such an accessible way, it makes people, I think it will actually encourage people to think they can, because you don't have to be in a certain position to do what you're asking. You don't have to be a certain person. You just can step in. It's for everyone, for every human. That's what we try and talk about in this hour as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Goodness Rippler. I like that.